Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. Today I am here with Carrie. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, Annie.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. We were just commenting on Carrie has like the coolest background. So if you're not watching this on video, you should watch it on video. But Carrie, thanks so much for being here. So what I love to do is, with your story, just kind of rewind almost all the way to the beginning. Like, where did things really start for you?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say, you were on one of the videos I watched, you were talking about fangirling, and that's kind of what I am. I'm a little nervous because I have just been watching your podcast. I've, listened to the book and absolutely love it. I mean, I've actually been looking for this for years because, I was like what Claudia calls a gray area drinker for years, and it's just really hard because people don't understand that you have a problem. They think that, well, you're successful and you're raising your children, you have a beautiful home, and so everything in your life must be fine.
Yeah.
That it's just, so from the outside, it's very different. But I didn't start out, I guess I never really drank at all in high school. I grew up in a non-drinking home. My mom actually was a single mom. She did drink when I was younger. I don't remember it. She says I dumped her alcohol down the toilet, and I don't remember doing that. But I never really was around people that were drinking. My parents did not drink. I remember when I was 13, someone had given my mom a bottle of wine. They never had alcohol in the house. And it was my 13th birthday. And I remember taking a few sips of the wine. That was and then I just wasn't interested in it. It just wasn't anything that interested me. I was always, always did well in school, always was in sports and athletics going out through high school. And my parents were like, you have to go to college. Like, it's not a choice. You need to go. And so when I graduated high school, that's what I did. I went for my first year of college, and I actually didn't, it's funny. I ended up going to SUNY Albany in New York, which is, I didn't know at the time, but it's one of the biggest drinking schools. And I remember my freshman year, seeing all these people, like the fraternities and sororities, and everybody was just getting drunk, and it wasn't my thing. I really, honestly, my first year there, I didn't get involved in it at all. I was very studious. I loved college. I loved school. I loved to study, and I was kind of isolated. I didn't make a lot of friends because a lot of the people that went there were from the city, New York City. And so for me, it was like I was this country girl, very naive, very inexperienced. I didn't know anything about, I just was never a very social person. I didn't have a big group of friends. I had just a very few close friends. And I kind of started to feel this, like, I guess towards the end of my freshman year, I kind of was feeling left out, like I ended up being part of the college radio. I DJ'd. I loved doing that. And I met some people there, but I didn't really, there wasn't really anybody that I connected with. I had a boyfriend all through high school. He was a year older, so he was in college the year before. And then things started going south in our relationship, and he ended up cheating on me.
Oh, brutal.
So I was home for the summer, and I was working at, there was a landscaper down the road from my parents' house, way out in the country. And I was working for the summer to make money, for college and stuff. And we had been together for like 5 years, and he broke up. I was just absolutely, it was probably at that time, before going back, when I went back in therapy in my childhood, one of the most heartbreaking moments of my life. It was really, really hard. And I think that's kind of what set me up for this pattern that I found in my life, where, I'll be in a relationship and it'll be great, and then things will go south, and then I will drink to make myself feel better. And so that was like the first time that it started. And I was a sophomore in college, and I went back to school, and I was like, well, I am going to be part of a sorority. So I pledged to sorority. I just went for, it was funny because, I mean, and this is not, I'm not trying to be anti-Semitic, but, you know, people called some of the people from Long Island, they would say, they would call them Japs. And I'm like, what does that mean? I didn't figure out what it meant till a year later. And it stands for Jewish American Princess. And that was kind of an example of who was there at that school. And so when I went to the sororities, you know, you would go and you'd meet everybody. And I went there, and I was just like, they all like would not talk to me. I mean, they just would not even talk to me. They could tell I was not in their group. And so this sorority that I ended up pledging was more, you know, down to earth, I guess you could say, you know, my type of a person. And it was funny because when I started pledging it, I didn't have any idea until I was done, like until I actually was in the sorority, that they were known for being drunks. I didn't know that. But while I was pledging, a lot of the challenges that we did rotated around drinking. So it was like, you know, you have to drink a certain amount of alcohol, or one of the things, like do a keg stand or do a funnel, or, you know, all those crazy things that we did in college. And so for me, I never had one drink. It was never like that. It was always this full out, like, how much can you drink? I mean, that it was like it was a big joke. It was fun, you know? And I mean, if I'm being honest about it, I really had a good time at that time. You know, I was in college. This was my first experience, really, I would say, in like being social with a group, because I'd never belonged to a group of friends. So during the school year, or when school was in session, it would be almost every night. It would be, we were out either at a party, at a bar, at an event. We always had all these different events that we would go to. And then when I would go home on break, I would not drink at all. And it was never an issue. It was just, I didn't drink at home, you know? It was funny because my nickname was the porcelain goddess, because I would throw up all the time, you know, when I was in college. And so it's funny now, because as I got older, I think because I wasn't throwing up, I kind of use that as an excuse, as like, well, it's not as bad as, you know, what I was doing. So I went through college like that. And I still, you know, I was still passing all my classes somehow, kind of just barely towards the end. Like my junior year, things got really dicey there. I ended up somehow got a scholarship to go to Japan for my senior year. So it was this college, we did like an exchange, you know, somebody from America went to the college in Japan, and so that was literally the best time of my life. Like, I had never flown in the air. That my first flight was to Japan. That was my first flight.
Wow, that's crazy. That's awesome.
You know, I mean, I was a sheltered person. I had never been outside of like New York, New Jersey area my whole life. And it was like, it's just like almost like a kid in a candy store. You know, you're like, wow, this is so, just the culture, and the people were so friendly. And I ended up meeting friends from all over the world. I had a friend from Sweden, a friend from Finland, and we all kind of got in this group of friends, and we would hang out together. And drinking was a big thing with us, you know. And so anyways, I did that for a year, and I think it kind of, you know, outside of the drinking, I mean, I separate things from the drinking, I guess, at that time, because it was still a really great experience, even though I was drinking a lot. You know, that was kind of what we did. I mean, we were still college kids, you know. But you know, there were a few scary times there, where I was drinking and was in a place, where I didn't know anyone, and um, ended up getting myself stuck in some situations that were not good. Um, so even though it was an exciting time, I think there were a lot of things that kind of came out of that were not good.
Yeah, for sure.
So then I came back home from Japan, and it was just like kind of a downer. I actually would still be there, but my visa ran out. I was there for the summer, and I had a student visa, and I couldn't get a work visa because I found out that I hadn't gotten my degree because I missed. It was just a kind of a mess. It was a glitch. I didn't get my degree, so I had to go back to school for like 2 classes to get more credits for my degree. So it was kind of a bummer, like flying back home and like living with my parents again at 22, you know. And I hadn't officially graduated, so I worked at the grocery store in our town, and you know, it was kind of like, okay. Um, Continued drinking, but again, I was never like, I wouldn't really drink at home. Um, I would more go out with friends, and especially because my parents didn't drink, it was like they did not like alcohol in the house.
Yeah.
My dad allows it now, but um,
Do they drink now or they still don't drink?
my mom will have a glass of wine occasionally, like probably 3 times a year.
Yeah.
um, my dad does not drink at all. His father was an alcoholic. He's my stepdad. So, kind of around the time, another part of the story is around the time that I started drinking, when I was 19, I met my real dad. I had begged my mom. I was like, I want to meet my dad. I want to know who he is. Because I knew that I had, you know, that he existed basically. And my mom had married my stepdad when I was 8. And so around this time when I was 19, she was like, okay, I'll find out where he's at. So he lived in the same town. So she found him and I met him.
Wow.
And he was an alcoholic as well. So it was kind of like, but he was like the cool guy. You know what I mean? Like, he never got married. I think maybe one time, but when I met him and we started spending some time together, we would go up to Canada because where my mom's from is like northern New York, so it's right on the Canadian border. And the drinking age in Canada was 18. So he would take me to Canada and we would drink. You know, I mean, I never thought anything of it. Or he would take me to a bar down the street from his house, and we would, you know, just an old country dive, and we would drink. So it was just kind of interesting how I guess that kind of reinforced that, you know, drinking was fun, and it was, you know, the fun people drank, you know. Um, and then let's see. Okay, so fast forward back to graduating from school and everything. Um, and then it was like I just ended up being in a really abusive relationship. So I went back to school. I was living with my grandmother at the time in northern New York, where my dad was from. And my dad my real dad ended up deciding that he didn't want to talk to me anymore. He found some reason why he wanted nothing to do with me. And so that kind of ended. Um, I was I was pretty devastated about that at the time because, you know, and it's funny looking back on it now, because it's like I was really upset, but I never thought to do anything about it. You know, it was just kind of one of those things that I was just like, okay, I had no control over this. Um, I ended up in an abusive relationship. It was really, really bad. Really bad. And my mom begged me, like I actually had a car and he like smashed the window out of he like disabled my car so that I couldn't go anywhere. And
Oh,
my mom begged me. She's like, please, please leave. Just get in the car. And it was some miracle of God. It really was. Like my aunt happened to live in Indiana. That's how I ended up here. And she was like, come and stay with me. She owned her own business. She's like, you can work for me. I'll give you a job and you can stay with me until you get on your feet. I got in my car and drove and I never looked back. And
mm,
it was like, it was so funny because at the time it seemed like such a long drive because I don't know how my car, somehow I had convinced someone, I think, to fix something that he had cut in the car, like the battery or something. And I remember the whole time I was driving, I was so afraid that my car was going to quit on me. Somehow my car made it all the way to Indiana from New York. I mean, it was just like, it was just a miracle. Like, and I don't think I would be alive right now if that hadn't have worked out for me.
oh, it's so amazing. I have a very similar story about getting in a car and driving away. So I'm like really feeling you right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was like the clothes on my back and like a small bag of stuff. That's what I brought with me. I mean, I literally had nothing. Um, it's just I haven't. It's funny to talk about this because I haven't like thought about any of this for a long time. Um, so I got a job with my aunt. I worked with her for almost a year. Um, so I worked full time, and then I ended up getting a job. I was like 23 at the time, so I waitressed at Applebee's and worked for my aunt. And of course, I don't know if you are aware of what waitressing, especially when you're younger, it's like
Oh,
there's a
yes.
lot.
I was a waitress for like 4 years and we did shots in the back room. It
Oh
was
yeah,
part of the job.
it's huge. It's huge. I mean, it was like after work every night, it was go out and get hammered. And I mean, people in Indiana, I mean, where I'm from, it's not like it is here. I mean, this area is just, there's a huge drinking culture here. Like, um, it's just kind of normal, for people to be even what I would call a full blown alcoholic. People kind of, don't think anything of it. And I ended up getting involved in, I don't even know how I got involved in bodybuilding, but um, I lost a bunch of weight. I started getting involved in bodybuilding, weightlifting. And so I just kind of stopped drinking. I mean, I didn't drink for like a long time. I mean, off and on, I guess I would, but um, I was really into bodybuilding and um, I did that for, gosh, I don't know how many years that was. Um, and I actually, things didn't work out with my aunt, um, working for my aunt. So I ended up getting another job and met another group of friends that through my work. And so, okay, wait, before this, yeah, so when I was about 23, um, so I had already, when I was like 7 or something, I had accepted Christ, but wasn't really like at all. I mean, didn't ever think about God. And again, had met a guy through my waitressing job who lived in Wisconsin, and we had a long distance relationship for almost a year. And then when we broke up, again, like things were just went in my life. It was like my life is over. I'm just, I was desolate. And I did drink I did drink a little bit but not as much as I had before. I kind of threw myself into bodybuilding instead of the drinking. And so that's kind of another thing that's like I found about myself. I'm very like black or white. Like it's either, which I think is what caused me for so long to not get help, was because, well, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't get up in the morning and drink. So I must be the other side. Because for me, it's one way or the other. There's this gray area is just really difficult for me. You know, I've learned to be more understanding, or know that there are gray areas in life, that life is not black and white. And so I threw myself into bodybuilding, got really fit, like for a couple of years, started doing like bodybuilding shows. And again, like, even though I think that, you know, weightlifting in and of itself was probably a good thing, that kind of started like an eating disorder for me, because I was like, well, you can only eat certain things. And then I would binge.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never had I guess I had always been kind of like a dieter type of person, but I never really struggled with my weight until I started doing like the really strict dieting and got down to low body fat. And so I did that for a long time. I dated a guy off and on during that time, but there really wasn't anything, you know, serious. And then my brother, I think I'm okay to share this. My brother was addicted to heroin for a long time. And so while all this stuff is going on in my life, my family is just very focused on him and, you know, what's going on with him, and trying to take care of him, trying to get him off the streets. He was actually living on the streets for a long time. And then he disappeared at one point. And we had no idea where he was. And my mom called me and she was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where your brother is. And so I moved back home for almost a year to just be with my family, because, you know, I didn't know. I felt like the right thing to do. And I did really well during this time. I'm sorry, I'm like skipping ahead. So backtrack to when I was 23, had broken up with this, you know, things ended with this relationship. And I ended up, like, I really at one point was like wanting to commit suicide. And I told God, like, I knew that God was there. And I told God, I was like, if you want me to live, I need you to do something to show me that you're there. And it's so funny. I had this old Bible. It was actually the red letter Bible, and it had this the red binding on, like, all the pages were painted red on the side. And I got that Bible out and I flipped, and the first thing that I flipped to was the story of the prodigal son. And it's weird. I don't know why I kept that Bible for so long, but I kept it with me everywhere. I never read it. It was falling apart. I never opened it up, I don't think. And I mean, that's when, you know, my life changed. I mean, I'm 42 now, so it's been 20 years that I've been walking with God. And I've had a lot of struggles and a lot of things to work out, but it's just amazing how I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for that, you know. So after I get saved, I started going to church, and And then I ended up meeting some Christian friends, and things were really good at first. And then for some reason, which I later found out, I mean, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but we all started drinking. Like, but it was like we would still go to church and we'd still talk about God, you know, but we were like getting drunk all the time, you know? Like it wasn't even like a just on the weekends thing. It was you know, even during the week. And I think that's kind of when, for me, I think drinking started to be more like a normal thing. Because it had always been like party, you know, like, or I guess like one of the things you say in your book is how, you know, there's so many things in the media, like movies, that when something really bad happens, like even there's a movie on Netflix right now, a series called How to Get Over a Breakup. And the first episode is just her getting shit faced. I mean, and so I think it was always like that for me, you know, and this was like, it kind of became a lifestyle. Like it was just a lifestyle of like, that's just what we did. I mean, we just would get ready to go out, me and my friend, and at the time, this person was my very best friend. I thought she was my best friend. And we would do shots, you know, and then we'd go out and have a great time. And we were all doing it. We were all a big group of friends. Well, I ended up, so in between that time, I moved back home for almost a year. I stopped drinking for a while. And, you know, I didn't think about it at the time, but it was like while we started drinking again, I had gained all this weight because I had been doing the bodybuilding thing, wasn't really drinking. And then I met these friends, we started drinking, and binge eating was another part of that as well. And I gained a bunch of weight. When I moved back home, I got back into weightlifting, lost a bunch of weight. And then I ended up moving back here because all my friends were here. And it's funny now looking back on it because I think until I was like 30 something, I was so naive about people. Like I hadn't interacted with that many people in my life. You know, I was kind of isolated. And this girl that I was, you know, was my good friend. I mean, I would have done anything for her. And at the time I felt like she would too, because it was like, we were just always together. It was like, you know, what are we doing this weekend? You know? And so while I was gone, she begged me to come back to Indiana. She was like, you know, and I didn't have any friends in New York. So that was another thing that was like, I'm not drinking. I mean, let me change that. I had my best friend from when I was in high school. She was married with children. I was still single at 29 at this time. And so it was kind of like another setup for how like drinking is the fun time. Like whenever I'm drinking, that's when all the fun times are, you know? So this person that I thought was my friend, like things got really bad really fast while I was gone. Like she was calling me, and she ended up getting in a couple car accidents because she was drinking like all the time. I didn't know it at the time, but because she never talked about, and I think this is another thing with like the Christian rules of like, you're not supposed to talk bad about your husband or your wife. She never told me that she was in an abusive relationship. I had no idea. No idea. I mean, I would spend the night at their house. They were married. We'd party, whatever. And I'd go to the spare room and they'd go in their bedroom, you know, and I never even thought about it, you know, and it's just, everything ended up turning into a big mess. So the couple that I was really close friends with, they were friends with another couple. And the wife, who I wasn't that close with at the time, she ended up leaving her husband. So all the drinking and stuff is going on at this time. Like, we're getting drunk all the time. She ended up leaving her husband for this other man and starts living with him. And so in the meantime, my close friend starts getting involved with her husband, the husband of the woman who left. And so, and it's so funny because all this is happening and none of us are thinking, oh, it's the drinking, that's causing all these problems. We're not even thinking about that. No, the drinking that's the fun time, And then I end up getting involved with a guy and ended up getting pregnant. So this all kind of happens at the same time, literally. Like, the one girl leaves, my close friend ends up getting involved with her husband and leaving her husband. It comes out, she says that he was abusive, so on and so forth. Anyway, so when she finds out I'm pregnant, she wants nothing to do with me. She continues on with her life as though it's, and it was weird because I lived right across the street from her parents at the time, which she was really close with her parents. And I was really close with her family. I mean, that's how good of friends I thought we were, is I was invited to all of her family, like function, like dinners, Sunday dinners and everything. And so the guy that I was with, we ended up moving in together. And when I got pregnant, and we were like, yeah, we're going to get married. So I just remember living across the street from her dad, and I ran into her dad, and he's like, we are so glad that you're doing the right thing and getting married. And I was just like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, now when I look back on it, at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do because I had been raised Catholic. So it was always like, oh my gosh, don't get pregnant out of wedlock, get married. And so in my mind, and I think at the time I was just panicked, and of course, as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I stopped drinking. But up until that point, I was drinking still like we had been. We were regular drinkers. And I find out I'm pregnant, I stopped drinking. So of course I'm no longer invited to any of the events, and so it kind of bred this really bad situation for me where I was with this guy. He ended up being abusive. We did get married, and he was very abusive. And it was just a really, really bad situation. So I had a small child that I was, I had my daughter when I was 30 years old. And it was just one of those things where I had lost all of my friends. I really had no friends. No one would, because all my friends were party, and was married to my ex-husband at the time. And I knew even before the marriage that we went away to Branson, Missouri to get married. And we got married, just the two of us, in a chapel. And then we had a reception afterward. It was like, as soon as we got married, he started being abusive. Up until that point, I had no idea. I didn't know, what the signs were or anything, or that was, it was just, or that it would be a pattern in my life. I thought I had escaped that by moving here. And so we get married. I have my daughter, which is like, one of the most joyful, if not the most joyful moment of my life, you know. I mean, it's so funny when I see women that are pregnant for this, because I just like, you just have no idea like how awesome that's going to be, you know, and how challenging at the very same time. It's like it's the craziest job you'll ever love. Yeah. So, a couple parties at our house where we got drunk. But it just wasn't, you know, what we did. And it just ended up being like we would break up, I moved out, we got back together. So for like 3 years, it was kind of off again, on again. And my daughter ended up being almost 3 years old, and things were just so bad. Like I was working, he made me go back to work. I wanted to stay home with her, but he was like, no, you need to work. So I go back to work, and I was working a really stressful job, taking care of my daughter, taking care of a home, and taking care of him because he refused to take care of himself, and then dealing with him being abusive to me. And I finally I just snapped. I couldn't do it anymore, you know. And my one thing that I did for myself is I was, you know, still into weightlifting and working out, and like that was my thing. And he would always be like, oh, you're there, you know, you're checking out the guys there, and you're there flirting with the guys, and blah blah blah. And I was like, I mean, if you want to come with me, you're more than welcome to, you know. So I ended up finally leaving, because my daughter was getting old enough, and she was starting to understand things. And I'm like, she knows what's going on here. Like he was calling me names and like screaming at me, and I'm like, or like in front of her and his son. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like, this is not how I want my daughter to be raised. So I left, and I leave him, move to an apartment, and start dating one of the biggest alcoholics in town. And start becoming friends with and then right at this time, I meet a group of girls who are big into partying and drinking, and that became my life. That's when things got really, really bad for me. I wasn't even drinking every day at that time. It was still just on the weekends, you know, partying and everything, but it would be from Friday until literally Sunday bedtime. I would be drinking, you know, not during the day, Saturday or anything, but, and it just made things worse because at that time when I left, my ex started stalking me, and it was just a whole lot of different incidents that were going on. So I was just having this like anxiety, this really bad anxiety. So then I would drink, but then not knowing the drinking was making it worse. So during that time, which was like 2 years, I think, a year and a half, maybe, I end up getting pregnant again. And it was like the same thing all over again. As soon as I got pregnant, I like lost everyone that I thought was my friend. You know, it's funny as I'm telling this story because I am seeing it almost like an outsider, and now looking back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was the drinking. The reason that you didn't, you know. And what was funny was I did still have some good friends, but it's like when you're in that, I would call it a lifestyle where you're in this group, and this is just an area where there's a lot of people that do that you're just in a group of friends and that's what you do. You just always go out and get drunk together. Or, you have parties, but there's always drinking involved, and there was always somebody that was worse off than me. So it was really easy to justify my own drinking and say, oh, it's okay. So after I had my second daughter, of course I didn't drink through my pregnancy. Actually, that's not true. I did drink during my pregnancy. I drank twice, and I had read somewhere that, oh, it was okay to have a glass of wine when you're pregnant. And so I had what ended up being like 2 or 3 glasses of wine. I remember one of my favorite drinks was, I had gotten into martinis at a certain period of time. And so at Christmas, I treated myself to a martini while I was pregnant. And looking back on it now, I'm like, why did I do that? That was so awful. But at the time, it was like, well, I haven't drank in so long, it's okay. And then after she was born, again, both of my daughters, it's like they are what has motivated me to try to change my life and to be a better person, and it's like for all these years, I just justified my drinking. I just always justified it. I always had a way to justify it. And then after I had my daughter, and then she got a little bit older, I was breastfeeding. So I couldn't really drink. Her dad was not involved in her life for the first 6 months or so. I can't remember. And so she was with me full time. I mean, again, one of the most amazing times of my life, it's so different having a second child, because it's like, you're not this anxiety ridden person. My first daughter, I mean, I thought that she was going to break if I held her too close. You know what I mean? It was just like, I actually ended up going on an antidepressant for a while, because I was just so, and at the time they said it was depression, but I think it really was more of like, having so much anxiety. So I kind of been on and off antidepressants. And then after I had my youngest, I decided, at one point, I'm like, well, I want to start drinking again. So I'm going to stop breastfeeding, when she was 8 months old. And, that's another really shameful thing that I just feel really guilty for that, because it was it meant more to me to be able to have fun, or what I thought of was, needing to do that. I didn't think it was the drinking. And so, but I was home a lot. And that was almost the first time that I started getting drunk at home. Up until then, I would occasionally, but not to the extent that I started. And plus I was really broke at that time. I didn't have any money. And so I didn't have the money to go out, So, after I had her, I guess it's just been kind of, I was 35 when I had my second child. No, I was 35. And for 5 years, it was kind of this off and on. I started getting these feelings you really should stop drinking. This isn't good for you, And so I would stop. I would go on this, health kick for a while, and then I would always start up again. And So then I ended up getting involved with another guy that was an alcoholic. um, because I was meeting these people when I was out, and you know, fell in love with him, thought he was just the greatest thing ever, and lo and behold, a year later, things ended up ending. And um, I ended up going back to school and getting my master's degree at this time, because I didn't have a very good job. Um, I think some of it was the company that I was working for just was not very um, like helpful in helping you like move ahead with your life or whatever, like getting ahead, getting a better job or better position. And so I went back, got my master's degree. Um, and this is the first time that I really remember that I could tell my mind was starting to go. Like, I was starting to have all these like really angry outbursts that I had never struggled with that my whole life. Never. I was never an angry person, never. And it was always like getting upset with my kids over something. Like, because it was always drinking the weekends my kids weren't there because I was a single mom. And then the weekends that I had my kids, I wouldn't drink most of the sometimes. I would still sometimes after they went to bed, drink. And it was just I couldn't handle anything that they were doing. It's just my reaction was just get angry. Um and it just, again, it was escalating to like um drinking more during the week, like at home. And again, like being in relationships with alcoholics, you know, you have something to compare and you're not as bad as they are. Um, and so as I started doing better in my career, like was getting more of an education, like, and then I had job stress on top of everything else because before I had a job where it was just like, go to work your job and go home, and you're not really responsible for anything. And then when I went back and got my master's degree, um, I ended up getting a better job. I was at my new job for 1 week when I found out that my father, my biological dad, had passed away the year before.
Hmm.
And it's like, again, like you think, my drinking is normal or whatever. And then at this time, it got to the point where I knew, like, I was just going to the liquor store and buying bottles of whiskey and whatever else I could get my hands on. And I was just literally, because I hadn't spoken to him for 20 years when he passed away. Like, and I felt like, why did I not try to get in touch with him? And my mom kept saying, he was the adult, you were the child, like he was the one that should have reached out to you. And I went through really, really, really bad time, like for a while. um and then like I think it was a year after that, I had a friend that ended up committing suicide. It was just all this stuff kept happening. um and I got really sick for a long time. I didn't know what the problem was. Like I still had to go to work because I was a single mom. Like I couldn't, and the doctor kept telling me, we don't know what's wrong with you, and I was like, well, it can't be because of the drinking. That can't be it. Plus I was on antidepressants and drinking all the time. Um, so I ended up was working at this job um, that I had for 3 years, and I had responsibility with this job. Um, Met another guy got like things didn't work out with him either. I think I was 40 when that happened. And I ended up in a really, really bad place. And that's when I finally knew. I was like, I need to get help, because I remember